Tell me if you've heard this before. It's March, and the Florida Panthers are in a funk.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Monday, March 17th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Monoman12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers and on Blue Sky at LOFLA Panthers. Shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Subscribe to the channel. And if you are on the YouTube, make sure to press that like button down below. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. So, Florida Panther fans, grateful to be back here once again on the show to discuss everything in the world of the Florida Panthers, and grateful to be home, back in the home base, as now I'll be home for a couple of days to just relax and have everything just settle, reset, and everything after everything that happened last week. And thank you guys once again for your patience. On today's show, we are going to discuss the weekend that was for the Florida Panthers as they dropped back-to-back games against the Montreal Canadiens and the New York Islanders. We're going to discuss how concerning the third period leads that the Panthers have blown over the last few months are actually. And we are going to discuss some of the Saturday headlines that we saw from Hockey Night in Canada, discussing everything with the Panthers and Sam Bennett engaging in contract talks once again. So let's go right to the recap of the weekend for the Panthers. A big emotional win on Thursday night against the Toronto Maple Leafs, where Sam Bennett scores twice going into this. So the emotions aren't going to be as high for the Florida Panthers going into this weekend, but this goes back to everything with Paul Maurice discussing emotional advantage when it comes to just where one team is versus where another team isn't. And for the Panthers, just when you think about for this one, uninspiring first periods for them, with the Panthers going down 2-0, and then to think that in the first one against Montreal, one goal that was taken off due to a goaltender interference by Brendan Gallagher, and even to think that goal shouldn't have even counted even before the interference because of Barkov getting interfered with on the entry. But then it happens again in the game against the New York Islanders, where you only get one shot on goal in the first period on Long Island. And the thing is, for the Panthers, it really comes down to just winning your battles in the D zone, breakout passes, especially what happens to in the middle of the ice, slow retrievals to the pucks as well on the power play, where Patrick Laine got not one, not two, but three opportunities. Montreal was faster to the puck retrievals and then getting it back mid to high and then back to the left side, where it wasn't even, all those three opportunities weren't even one-timers. With Patrick Laine, it was what he is known for. Had so much time even to get a little bit of a handle right before he got a wrister past the far side glove of Sergei Bobrovsky. And once again, I mean, it's just when it comes to the Panthers and just what's happened over the weekend, it's not just errant passes; it's unforced errors for them. The pass that ended up in the back of the net from Barkov, where Seth Jones is a right-handed shot going up the ice. You pass it to the part where he had to get his backhand when his momentum is already going forward, and then that ends up in the back of the net for the Panthers. There was one battle in the D zone corner where Nico Mikkola wins a board battle and then backhands it in the middle. It's just at this point for the Panthers, it's a little bit lackadaisical. It's lazy in a way for that. And in that same play on Saturday, Dmitry Kulikov had to slide to make a stop there. And for for both of these games, you can't really put any blame on the goaltender. Vitek Vanacek, a shutout through two periods on Long Island for them. And to think that the Panthers got in on the scoring, they were lucky to be tied 0-0 with one shot on goal through the first period, and then Barkov and Reinhart get in on the scoring. A nifty pass from Alexander Barkov off a rebound after winning a battle there, and then a redirection goal to make it 2-0. And to think that, wow, the Panthers only get one shot, and to think that the amount of times that Bo Horvat was getting in on a breakaway and Vitek Vanacek was making a stop there, you think that, okay, the Panthers are not playing their best and they could find a way to win this game as well. And it's crazy to think that for the stretches for New York on the Sunday, just how he was still able to be on the top of the crease and still tight. And for the Panthers in both games, they had a power play going into the third period in both games. One of the times for the Panthers, it was to tie the game, an opportunity for them, and then in the second time against the New York Islanders, it was a chance to create separation and for them to put it away, and they couldn't even give themselves an opportunity to do that. And Paul Maurice on the Saturday, he spoke about how he didn't want to take away what Montreal was doing right, but based on what Florida did wrong based on that. But that was also a sign of a coach that was just not too pleased with how his performance and also possibly what could have been, not necessarily what we know, what could have been said behind closed doors, but I could only imagine how upset and how honest he must have been to the group, and to come out the very next day to only get one shot in the first period. I mean, you can't. It's for the Panthers in this point. It's unacceptable for a Stanley Cup champion. I know they're very thin on the blue line. I know they lost Dmitry Kulikov in the first period after going for that check on Anthony Duclair after holding his forearm after that. But still, if this boils over to Thursday, which the worst part about this is the fact that there's 3 long days in between one game to the next, is the fact that there's a lot of time for the Panthers to really think about this. But this could also be a good thing as well. They have a long time to think about this. They already flew home after the weekend to at least get a little bit of time. They're not going to stay on the road all these 3 days only to just go from New York to Columbus. I mean, that could have been a great bonding opportunity for the team in order to get things right, but also for the Panthers also to just reset a little bit for them. So the thing is, this always tends to happen in this part of the year. So they let's not forget that they lost 8 games out of 10 at the end of March last year, and they still found a way to get to the top of the division for them. So we still don't know on what's going on with the status of Dmitry Kulikov after that hold on Anthony Duclair. They didn't practice today. They're going to be back on the ice on Tuesday, so we'll know a status of Dmitry Kulikov then. But really, for the Panthers in this, the good news is Mackie Samoskevich, he is still trending upwards. A goal in every other game in the last 12 games. So 9 points in the last 12, 6 goals, 3 assists, and an even in the plus-minus category. Third in goals for rookies, right behind Matvei Michkov and Macklin Celebrini. So just goes to show the kind of company that Mackie Samoskevich has been in, and now getting more responsibility, being on the top power play unit for the Panthers here. Great news for Mackie there. But really what it comes down to is just the lack of connection for the Panthers and just giving away the puck. 25 giveaways on Saturday night in Montreal. And the fact is, we spoke about the goal that was taken away off of for goaltender interference. There was also another opportunity later in the game where if Gustav Forsling didn't have his stick down, Yaroslav Slavkovsky would have extended the lead for the Montreal Canadiens there, and Seth Jones thankfully batting the puck out of the crease area for them. So really for the Panthers, and the thing is, both of their second periods in Montreal and New York, they played a lot better. They were getting out of their zone a lot better, but still really couldn't find even more separation for them in New York, and couldn't find a way to at least decrease the deficit in Montreal the night before for them. So just overall frustrating, which once again, goaltenders just gave them a chance. That's the worst part about it, is that the fact that that it's breakaways, it's lost battles, it's being too spread out in their own zone. That's the worst part about this. And the fact that the Panthers switched up the lines with Evan Rodriguez going back to the top line and Carter Verhaeghe going back to the second midway through the Montreal game and carrying it over to the game against the Islanders. still couldn't find a way to get even a point in this one for them in this weekend. But for the Panthers, it's once again a mental reset for them in just two teams who are just continuing to fight for their playoff lives, as now it's just over 10 games to go right before the start of the postseason in mid-April. It's March 17th right now, April 17th. So 1 month from today will be the end of the regular season. So this team we're going to be able to judge and really have a good view of how this team is going to look heading into the postseason. So not only do the Panthers have 3 days off in between now and Thursday, but they'll have the same thing next week. So but at the same time, they're going to have 3 more back-to-backs. So how prepared are they going to be for all those scenarios coming up when the schedule just is once again compressed, as something that we've talked about all season long, thanks to the 4 nations that was a brilliant success for the NHL. But it's gonna come at a cost of a team that has won the Stanley Cup, short off season, and with a whole bunch of injuries, 3 players and 1 suspension. It's gonna really test your depth and your mental fortitude in times like this. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we are going to discuss the blown leads for the Panthers that has happened over the last few months. We are going to discuss how concerning it actually is. We are going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Factor. And eating healthy doesn't have to be complicated. With Factor, you get chef-made, dietitian-approved meals that are ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes, so you can fuel your body without the hassle of cooking. Factor meals arrive fresh, never frozen, and with 40 options across 8 dietary preferences each week. You can customize your menu to fit your goals, whether that's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. And I love that Factor keeps you on track with healthy, delicious meals with the time-consuming prep. The Korean beef bowl and creamy Parmesan chicken are some of my favorites. They taste like homemade, but takes no effort. Factor also offers smoothies for breakfast and snacks to always have something nutritious ready to go. Eat smart with Factor. Get started with Factor at factormeals.com/Factor Podcast and use code Factor Podcast to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code Factor Podcast at factormeals.com/Factor Podcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Also, this episode is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. And looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shells variety. It's the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost, they're my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Get snacking and cracking with the snack that packs a protein bunch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Back on this Monday, March 17th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Monday. I want to wish everybody a happy St. Patrick's Day, and also that if you plan to go out tonight, please do so safely. Also, I want to say congratulations to 2 former Panthers, one of them a former Panthers prospect, Emil Heineman. He's been playing the last 10 games for the Montreal Canadiens since the 4 Nations break after being hit by a car while he was walking as a pedestrian in Utah. And great to see that he is back in the fold for the Montreal Canadiens. And also Mike Riley, former Panther, who was claimed by New York last season off of waivers and made it back after a scary situation where he was going to get tested and came back to know that he had a heart condition. Last night was his first game since November 1st for him. So grateful to see 2 former Panthers make their way back on the ice for them. So I want to discuss how concerning you guys might be, and maybe give you a level of where my concernometer is for the Panthers here with the blown third period leads, because 85-0-4 in over 2 years, including the postseason, where the Panthers have had a lead and not a single one of those losses in regulation. All their 4 losses in that span in those 89 games came in the extra frame for them or a shootout. So I posted this on X. How concerned are you about the Panthers' recent stretch of blowing multiple third period leads? 67.8% of you say not at all, and while 32.2% say very. So those are the 2 options for them. And I'll read one of the replies that we got here on the channel. And one of them is from at Coulda Gone D1, funny name. Quote, tough road trip for sure. Without Ekblad, Tkachuk, Marchand, and Kulikov, you want to be playing the peak hockey in April, not March. Last night was terrible loss, no question, but we're coming off a 6-game win streak. Let's cut them some slack. Close quote. And yeah, let's talk a little bit about about what Paul Maurice said also for the Panthers. And he said that the turnovers are not a trend, but the bodies going down have been more of the trend. But also, let's take into consideration what the 4 losses for the Panthers this season have been when having the multiple third period leads. Now, again, 4 in the last 2 months. January 13th at Philly, up 2-1. They lose a board. The Panthers lose a board battle with Tobias Bjornfoot and Nico Mikkola. The Flyers worked it low to high, and Noah Cates tied it off a rebound. Even though the Panthers scored on the power play, then Philly gets their own power play off another rebound. They lost the battle after the shot on goal, and then Noah Cates goes on a breakaway, and Barkov couldn't close the gap, and then backhanded it past Bobrovsky. January 22nd, a Wednesday nationally televised game in LA. Panthers are up 1-0, and at the point where the LA Kings tie the game, the Panthers, once again, it's the same issue of struggling to get out of their zone, not connecting tape to tape, and they're again outshot 11-1 at the point where Sam Bennett scored off a rebound. The Panthers are too spread out; they can't clear the net front, and then later on, Adrian Kempe scores at the net front, and both times was Belinskis and Tobias Bjornfoot. They couldn't stick a fork in it and couldn't get back out, which is a reminder that if the Panthers are healthy, those 2 aren't going to be the guys out there. Chances are the Panthers are going to have Ekblad on that right side with Forsling, Mikkola, Seth Jones, and Nate Schmidt, and Dmitry Kulikov, if healthy. We still don't know the status. We might have to see Tobias Bjornfoot called up if the injury is worse than it looked on Sunday. But also, here's the thing about Nate Schmidt of just how much he's gone through since the trade for Seth Jones, and also even pushing Kulikov down one even before the Ekblad suspension. He was going from playing on the right side, with Belinskis, to when Kulikov was back down, he had to shift back to the left, and then with the Ekblad suspension, going back to the right, and then with 5D on Sunday, having to play with a different partner, double shifting sometimes every single guy. So sometimes that doesn't create chemistry, and then sometimes that creates a little bit of confusion for a player like Nate Schmidt, who's had to deal with that for the last few weeks and having to get acclimated to a new partner. And when you're on the third pair, you're gonna always get have a rotating partner. So that's the tough part about something that Nate Schmidt has gone through this season, being in the role that he's in for the Panthers. Next one, March 11th, just last week against the Boston Bruins, had a 1-0 lead and even went up 2-0 with the Panthers scoring on the 5-on-3. Cool. Later on, Kulikov has an errant pass to Mason Lohrei, and then the Panthers can't get back to get a block shot. And then later on, Pavel Zacha scores. It's a lesson for Mackie Samoskevich on what to do when it comes to a clear. Maybe be a little bit more patient, and then the timing of when to support when you see your defenseman beat. And also last night with Gatcomb coming off the pressure from Jones, and then it's a little bit discombobulated for the Panthers there, and then he gets on the wraparound, and then Sliplikov on an untimely pinch by Gustav Forsling, he goes on a breakaway. And listen, where it's the playoffs, it's a little tighter. There aren't as many risks, and although it's a very inexcusable pass by Uvis Balinskis that landed on the stick of Noah Dobson, that's a lesson for Uvis Balinskis on, especially because the Panthers won the draw in the neutral zone. That's an opportunity for them to circle back a little bit and just, okay, where's the support for your other D? Although it's a partner that you're not playing with often for him because of the fact of the situation with the injury last night. That's also something that he could maybe be a little bit more patient. And the thing is, once again, it's the trend for these blown leads, unforced errors. But here's the thing about these 4 losses for the Panthers. There was a big gap between the last one from the second one, to the third. January 22nd all the way to March 11th. So when the Panthers are down, they are, it tends to last a little bit. But obviously at the same time, when they're up, they tend to stay up at the same time. And it's March. remember Toronto in late March, that epic rant from Paul Maurice to the Panthers on that review on that ended up being reversed for offside. Panthers ended up turning it around after that. Last year, I already mentioned this on the show, the same thing. They won 2 games out of 10 at one point in late March. And really, the Panthers stopped the bleeding last year, if I remember correctly. It was in Philadelphia, which wasn't the necessarily most inspiring win, but they found a way to just calm things down a little bit. And sometimes that's all you need, even if it's winning ugly. And to think, they almost had that even on Sunday against the Islanders. They almost stopped the bleeding, just a few breakdowns from them once again. And a little bit of an interesting tweet by Mike Kelly that I saw earlier on X from the Panthers, and this is what he spoke about from the Panthers last season to this season for the Panthers. He said, quote, "The Panthers got burned by a couple of off the rush goals in the third period last night against the Islanders. Florida has allowed 53 breakaways this season. Only Anaheim has allowed 4 more, 55. The Panthers minus 30 breakaway differential is tied with the Ducks for last in the NHL. The good news for the Panther fans is their minus 27 differential was worse in the NHL last season. Things turned out all right." Close quote. Which goes to show, once again, it's a tale of 2 seasons sometimes between the regular season and the post. And we haven't even seen Brad Marchand take the lineup for the Panthers yet. So that's the other thing on just how the Panthers and just getting reinforcements back at a great time. And not that injuries should be the ultimate excuse for them as well. But still, the fact that you let it happen now so that they can get it right later on. And let's put into perspective how impactful that 6-game winning streak was for the Panthers. The fact that they went almost 2 weeks without having a deficit helped them in the regulation wins category. Right now, if you look at the standings, Toronto and Tampa Bay are 4 points behind with 2 games in hand. If Toronto wins both of their games, even in regulation, the Panthers will still own the tiebreaker. It gets a little bit more difficult with the Tampa Bay Lightning. They have to win both of their games in hand in regulation to take over and own the tiebreaker over the Panthers. But their schedule is a lot more difficult than the Panthers, at least in this next week. At Dallas, at Vegas this week. They'll be facing a desperate Ottawa team, which the Panthers will as well. They'll be facing a desperate New York Rangers team twice at Madison Square Garden. The Panthers season series against the New York Rangers is done. And at home against Toronto and the Florida Panthers, which will be game 82 for the Panthers, game 81 for the Bolts. So the Panthers are still very much in the driver's seat at this point. Toronto will play twice before Thursday. Tampa Bay will play once before Thursday. Both of them are in action actually tonight for them. So we'll know more a little bit before Tuesday on how things stand. And if Tampa Bay happens to win not in regulation, then we'll get a better understanding on how things are shaped before the Panthers take the ice again on Thursday night on the road in Columbus. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we are going to discuss the latest Saturday headlines from Hockey Night in Canada and the Panthers and Sam Bennett re-engaging in contract talks. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. And ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spend in one place so you can stop just managing your money and building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track and shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your order. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONHL for half off of your first year.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Third and final segment here on this Monday, March 17th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So, one of the Saturday headlines for Hockey Night in Canada discussed that the Florida Panthers and Sam Bennett have re-engaged in contract talks. So, now things are looking a little bit uncertain for Aaron Ekblad and his future. And I think that, and listen, I've gotten a lot of crap from listeners over the last, even before the Seth Jones trade, about keeping Ekblad over Sam Bennett. But now that the trade has actually happened and that there's a lot of term left on the deal, I didn't think that the Panthers were going to be trading for someone with term. But I'm allowed to change my tune here. And with the Panthers getting it done and it fitting the window once again of getting the core and having them there till 2030, it fits with the timeline. So the uncertainty for Ekblad is definitely there. Does the PED suspension necessarily change things? I can't necessarily tell you one way or the other. I think that teams are going to be looking for right-handed shot defensemen no matter what, and I understand that there's a lot of pressure for someone like Ekblad to get back on the ice healthy as well there. And here's the thing. There's no extension in place for a guy like Henry Jokiharju in Boston. David Savard's more of a third pair guy, so I don't know if the Panthers would go after him. And even the guys on the Cats and Racks podcast, which is a podcast that I highly recommend, they spoke about the possibility of Scott Mayfield of the New York Islanders possibly being buy out by the Islanders. So that could be possible reinforcement on a cheaper deal for a second pair defenseman for the Panthers while they have Seth Jones under contract for multiple years. And I got shared a tweet of the Seth Jones's 5-on-5 numbers, 6-1, and expected goals at 41%. I'm not going to freak out about that for now, but for just getting acclimated to a new system, it's going to take a little bit of time. So with the Panthers and Sam Bennett re-engaging in contract talks, my opinion still stands at least on this, that it's going to be 1 or the other. Possibly both of them walk as well. But you're not keeping both. I don't think it's financially feasible for it to happen for the Panthers here. And I also put another poll. I put 2 polls today. It's a rarity whenever I do 2 polls. Is what is the deal breaker? What is the number that would be a deal breaker for you for Sam Bennett re-signing with the Panthers? And these numbers are actually fairly close for what I put out. 32% of you say 7 million, 23 say 7.5, 23.3% say 8 million, and 20.9% of you say 8.5. I wasn't expecting these numbers to be this close, but I'll give you my opinion on it. And obviously you come to the show to hear my opinion on things. For me, my deal breaker will be 7.5 for the Panthers. And you got to consider what the Panthers are able to offer with them being the only team that could offer him that 8th year over other teams that could offer him the 7th and no more than that. If you give him if he gets an 8.5 million offer elsewhere, then the Panthers, as far as the full length of the deal to lower the AAV, would be just under 7.5. A 9 million AAV elsewhere would just have the Panthers just under 8. So that's something to consider. I don't think that there's a team that would offer him that much. I think that a team will come close, but again, there are teams that are desperate for a first or second line center. He could be a first line center on most teams. That's the thing, that are just desperate. And with the cap going up, there is going to be opportunities for teams just on the bubble or trying to take that next step. And they need a guy like Sam Bennett who's had that playoff identity, who can bring it. So there is that possibility, but at the same time, how far are they willing to go with a guy who doesn't necessarily produce the points like Sam Bennett does? Obviously, contract years can be outliers. I mean, and Sam Bennett, what he's doing in the contract year, again, might price himself out. But at the same time, I'd be comfortable with 7.5, knowing that it's not too far off of Verhaeghe, and although Verhaeghe's a winger who could score goals, Sam Bennett, when you talk about winning, you think about going into every summer and not having to worry what's going to happen down the middle with Barkov, Lundell, and Bennett. But at the same time, if Lundell does take that next step and injury issues do happen with Sam Bennett, are you willing to pay 7.5 for a third line center? Another question to ask for the Panthers here. But at the same time, 1, 2, 3. And that's Bill Zito can sleep well at night, knowing that he just needs to fill different parts of the roster for them. And that next summer might be that gap year for the Panthers in trying to fill a defenseman on the cheap if they do go to the route of re-signing Sam Bennett. And apparently there was an offer earlier in the season that both sides could not agree on. But it seems to me that it's going to take to the point of it's not going to be signed anytime soon. I'm not expecting it. I think Sam Bennett would want to test the market. If I'm in his position and trying to create generational wealth for myself, I want to see what's out there in order for himself to get that last chance of a big major payday, especially because there was so much doubt for Bennett at the beginning of his career. Even at the Combine, Sam Bennett couldn't complete one pull-up. And he went from that to Stanley Cup champion and a major part of a top 6 group for him. But also, if the Panthers decide to go a cheaper route, if they let both walk, which I wouldn't write out that possibility. There are other center options that the Panthers can consider on the cheap. Trent Frederick is going to be in a UFA. If they go to the trade route, Trevor Zegras, who's fallen out of favor, it seems, in Anaheim, he's going to be an RFA not this year, but the year after. And younger guy on a cheaper deal, that could be your third line center. And it's not the biggest of matchups for Trevor Zegras going if he's part of your lineup. And it could be a $3 to $4 million difference on your cap, which could be reinvested in a second pair defenseman, assuming that you don't re-sign Aaron Ekblad as well. So there's options, whether they keep Bennett or not. I would love that at a certain number for the Panthers. But there's also one option in-house on the very, very cheap. Grayson Sachin, who's been outstanding in the WHL with the Edmonton Oil Kings. 11 more goals in one less game played this season. Already has his ELC signed. He's going to be part of the Charlotte Checkers at least next year. But is he ready for the show? It's too early to tell for that. And he's got the hands, speed, gets to the net front, a right-handed shot center, by the way, for him. So that's another thing for the Panthers on just if you bring Grayson Sachin in, that's a different look that you're putting in there for multiple right-handed shots. You already have Reinhart on the team, Evan Rodriguez on the team, which again, this could be Evan Rodriguez's last year with the Panthers, knowing that he's going into the last year of his deal, and that, like Jacob Winans and I said, if they're off by a few million, they could trade Evan Rodriguez and go with a younger option, and maybe Grayson Sachin could start on the wing for the Panthers, if so. So that's another thing of the Panthers on what direction they could go to if they decide to if they decide to retain a proven guy who's won them a Stanley Cup and could very well do it again in his role, or give themselves an opportunity with the cap going up and being able to spend there. So Panthers, it feels like they're in a win-win regardless of which direction they go because of who they already have now and into the future. So we'll see where the contract talks end up going for the Panthers and Sam Bennett. But they've resumed, but don't expect an announcement soon. We heard about this all season at this time last year with Montour and Sam Reinhart, and it took more than a few months for them to actually get something done. So just wanted to give you guys an update there on what was said publicly by Elliotte Friedman on Hockey Night in Canada. So we'll see where it goes. But that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Later on in the week, we are going to discuss everything that is news coming out of the GM meetings for the NHL. And we are going to discuss a survey from The Athletic ranking the owners across the NHL. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.